What's going on with the ape community? Time for a GME update because somebody sent me this post actually from Superstonk. And this is from Mojo Master 5. And the post says, he's back, Keith in the house. And speculation / opinion. So the post here, we'll go through it. And I just want to share my thoughts on what this is, what it looks like. I haven't gone through the whole thing yet. Obviously, I can tell from the top here what this is about. And let's see what's going on. Is Roaring Kitty getting back into GME options? That's the assumption I have taking a look at this. So let's get right in. So it says, see that? Yeah, that run beginning around 1430. So I'm assuming that they're using Eastern time. Was a block of 5,025 calls for 15 NOV picked up at the offer. So this is assuming that they're buys. And a really important note here is when there are the different classifications for the price based on if it's executed closer to the bid or the offer, it's not perfect. In this case, I'm assuming it's representative of them being purchases, but just a general note for people to be aware of because it's not as simple. It's not definitive. You should just know that. Could be our boy decided to make a splash today and triggered a little gamma squeeze action while doing so. Looks like a couple big boys followed in his wake as well. And let's take a look here at their screenshot. And they're just showing the movements. This is the volume for that contract. Now, a couple notes specifically with respect to gamma squeeze. Gamma squeezes are really specific, and 5,000 options is just not going to do it. The other thing to keep in mind is if we take a look at GameStop here, and let's zoom this in just a little bit so that we have kind of near-term price action on a really cool note. If you guys remember, I drew this 20.5 level a long time ago. And that was where I was expecting support to be found just based on prior price activity around that level going back longer term time frame, right? Going all the way back to here. And the really cool part about this is that it does seem like that might be close to what this new floor might look like for GameStop, which would be maybe mid 20s on the lower end, maybe mid 19s. But it looks like it's really respecting this general range, meaning lots of people are buying and selling in here. So for the near term, it doesn't look like it's moving parabolic either direction, but I don't think that's a bad thing because I think it's starting to base out here and have kind of a new generalized value. Now, if we take a look at the options in here though, I want to show you a couple things quickly. Looking at the 15 NOV, the 25s, if we see the current delta, they're about a 33 delta as it sits now, and the gamma is like a 0.09. Now, the idea of building a gamma ramp actually isn't about individual strikes. A gamma ramp is built over several strikes being ramped up because the way that a gamma ramp will work is as the underlying rallies and options fall in the money, especially as they get closer to expiration, market makers, who are typically the counterparty, would start buying shares to cover the new risk, meaning in case they fall in the money and they have to deliver. Then, as they are buying shares, that moves price up a little bit into the next strike. And if there's enough open interest at the next strike that was at the money, they have to start buying more to hedge that risk. And then it pushes it to the next strike. And then that's how a gamma ramp is built. So right now, there's just not enough depth in these options to actually serve as an actual gamma ramp, just for a general understanding about more so how those will perform. So, and then the idea of a couple other players following along, it does look like that because the volume today was over 20,000. So this actually popped up on a couple of my scans today just because of the activity pretty drastically exceeding an already high OI. So yeah, definitely other people moved along. However, if you've watched my other videos on stuff like GameStop, you already know that at these kind of more primary expirations, as I refer to them as, you're going to tend to see more concentration. So what that means is anything that ends in like a 0 or a 5 will tend to have more volume than things that are in the middle, and definitely whole number strikes as compared to half strikes. So if we look at the 20s, there's 4,000 of those. If we look at the 21s, there is 427. Then if we look at the 22s, there's 1,500. And you kind of get the point here until we get to the 25s, which even before today had 18,000. And then if we get to the 30s, you can see that had 13,000. So that's just a really natural tendency as people buy options. So again, just a general note for you all. This looks like just some of the other trades that went through, because these are short dated calls. If he doesn't close this trade right away for a profit, which he absolutely could, then he must anticipate something else is coming down the pipe. Maybe it's him, maybe it's a copycat. In any case, exercise caution. So I like that they're being objective in their analysis, specifically in terms of maybe it's him, maybe it's a copycat. I think this is already very presumptive in terms of saying if he doesn't, because again, we have no idea. Now, I want to talk about a few things. The very first thing I want to show you are some of Roaring Kitty's habits. And if you're unfamiliar, I've been doing a live stream every Saturday for like the last, 4 months now. And we've spent at least 2 of those months analyzing every single trade that he's made and going through one by one. Now, there's a couple really high level tendencies that I've been able to pick up looking at his stuff. The first thing is, if I take a look at the various days to expiration that he tends to get in at, the overwhelming majority have entries that are much longer days to expiration. That's actually what this is here. It's tracking the actual days to expiration for his entries. The shortest was a 3 DTE trade. I literally could see it. This was back in 2020, and it was a very specific trade that was wrapped around a thesis he had around a console release and the impact around earnings. So this was the only circumstance that I've seen anything shorter than a month for him. Now, that being said, there was a circumstance here where in April, it did look like there was some activity that appeared to be him, but we have no idea because he didn't post any sort of yellow updates, nothing like that. And these were actually slightly shorter term options, but still not super short. So the main thing I want to highlight is that if this is him, it would be very, very contrary to his standard positioning at all, meaning just days to expiration selection would be quite novel in this case. Now, as far as delta selection, I think that's about right. So he does tend towards the slightly out of the monies. So this looks fine. The main thing I see here is just way too short in duration. Now, if we go to unusual whales and we take a look at this, there's a couple other notes that I want to highlight. The first one is that, again, if this were him, this is still a very small position for him. So $350,000, again, for most mortals, that's a ton of money. But for him, if you're trading a several $100 million account, it's tiny. And I would be really surprised. The other thing is, I don't think this is him phasing into a position, because going back to that, we tend to see multiple entries on his prior quote unquote phasing in of positions that then hits a crux that he sizes in more aggressively. Now, this is using the 21 June 20 calls that he was getting into about a month out in 20 May. This ended up being a massive position. So this was scaled in over several days. If he was trading a really short-term idea, he doesn't have this much time to scale in like this. So I would actually expect him to size in much more heavily upfront if I thought that that was him, which again, I'm a little dubious of it. In short, this just doesn't look like his activity. Now, there are things that do match though. The strike selection absolutely does. The 5,000 lot size certainly does. But again, it's always important to remember he doesn't have any sort of hold of 5,000 lots, right? Other people transact in 5,000 lots. The position size is a little bit small. The timing is about right, because as we went through all of his old trades here, I definitely noticed a lot of towards end of day entries as well as beginning of day. First hour was pretty common for some of his other positions, and definitely towards the, this is Pacific time, towards the end of the day is very common. The majority of the trades were done a little bit later in the day. So that fits as well. In general, it looks like a slightly mixed bag. I lean towards this doesn't look like him. If you have an opinion, let me know in the comments if you think this is him or not. Be an outlier, be an ape. I'll see you guys later.